Welcome, everyone, to Alaska Quarterly Review's Reading and Conversation series. This event is being recorded and will be premiered on the Alaska Quarterly Review YouTube channel. I am Ronald Spatz, Editor-in-Chief of Alaska Quarterly Review, and before we begin, I'd like to make a few important acknowledgments. Alaska Quarterly Review gratefully acknowledges the Anchorage Museum for hosting and the Center for the Narrative and Lyric Arts, Alaska Quarterly Review's 501c3 umbrella organization, which makes this event possible. I also want to make a land acknowledgement. Alaska Quarterly Review recognizes the indigenous land on which all Alaskans live. AQR is located in Anchorage, and Anchorage is Denali homeland. Denali is the language spoken by the traditional, present, and future caretakers of this land, and land acknowledgement opens a space with gratefulness and respect for the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of indigenous peoples and marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. Today, I am just delighted to be joined with two of Alaska's writer laureates, our immediate past writer laureate, Heather Lende, and our brand spanking new writer laureate, Vera Starbard. I'm going to do some introductions of both of them, and then I'm going to start with a few questions, and we'll have a little conversation for a little while, so you get a flavor of the people who lead, in a way, the literary arts for the state of Alaska. Heather Lende is the immediate past Alaska State Writer Laureate. Her essays and stories, mostly about life and sometimes death in Haines, Alaska, have been distributed widely from the Anchorage Daily News and the Christian Science Monitor to NPR and Country Living. She's a former contributing editor at Women's Day magazine, and for over 20 years wrote some 400 obituaries for the Chilkat Valley News in Haines. She's the author of best-selling memoirs from Algonquin Books, Find the Good, If You Lived Here, I'd Know Your Name, Take Good Care of the Garden and the Dogs, and most recently of Bears and Ballots, that was published in 2020. Her honors include Alaska Governor's Award for Distinguished Service to the Humanities, the Episcopal Bishop of Alaska's Bishop Cross Award, and the Middlebury College Alumni Award. She's on the faculty of the North Words Writers Symposium, and Find the Good was this year's Alaska Reads pick. Of her work, Booklist wrote, Lende writes emotionally, but never sentimentally, giving us the best Alaska memoir of late, maybe the best ever. Kirkus Reviews deemed it this way: optimistic, slightly humorous reflections on living a fully engaged, meaningful life. And the Boston Globe concluded, good old-fashioned American values coming from small town Alaska. Vera Starbard is a brand new Alaska Writer Laureate. She is Chilkat and Denali writer and editor. She is playwright in residence at Perseverance Theater through the Andrew W. Mellon National Playwright Residency Program, and editor of Alaska's First Alaskans magazine. Vera is also a writer for the PBS children's program, Molly of Denali, which won a Peabody Award in 2020 and was nominated for 2 Children and Family Emmys in 2022, followed by 3 nominations in 2023. Starbard's first commissioned play, Devilish, that was deemed by the Anchorage Press as an Alaskan masterpiece, was premiered at the Perseverance Theater in Juneau in 2019. Vera has won many various awards at all levels, from local to national, including the Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Award and an Alaska Literary Award. When Vera was selected for the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation National Playwright Residency Program in 2016, she was the first Alaskan and first Alaskan Native American Indian resident in the history of the program. Vera currently serves on the Howe Round Advisory Council and the Kachemak Bay Writers Conference Board, as well as serving as a founding member of the Alaska Native playwriting group, Dark Winter Productions. Her full-length play, Our Voices, will be heard and premiered at the was premiered at the Perseverance Theater in 2016. It was then published in textbook form by Contemporary Plays by Women of Color in 2017 and turned into a 1-hour radio adaptation that aired nationwide in 2018. So now to begin, today we're close to the beginning of 2025. We've just had a national election, and we're sort of at a tipping point in all kinds of ways in our country, maybe in the world. And from Alaska Quarterly's point of view, the literary arts couldn't be more important. That writing is a moral act, and writers serve an absolutely indispensable function. And so I'd like to start by perhaps talking with each of our writers, and maybe we could go back and forth. And maybe we could just start with one of your works that you would like to talk about that actually share your vision as a writer. In other words, what you hope the impact might be from it. So if we could just start maybe with Vera being our new writer laureate, and then move to Heather Lende, and then just begin our conversation there and see where it leads. Okay, so Vera, you're on.
Goodness for having me. So glad I get to have this conversation with Heather. I am brand new. And I think the sort of most obvious one is my first play, Our Voices Will Be Heard, because it's kind of right there in the title, right? It's Our Voices Will Be Heard. And the play itself is a fictionalized version of what happened when my mother found out about the sexual abuse that I was going through as a kid, and sort of the fallout and what happened on it. It's very fictionalized. It happens in the play in a 19th century Chilkat village, but while it's a really specific story, the whole thing is about doing the best you can, even though nobody's perfect and we're messing up right and left. And really the mother is kind of the hero of the story, and she doesn't do everything right, but she sure does something, and she tries and tries and tries, and she at the end actually was almost sort of a prophetic thing of what actually happened in real life, where triumphant in a quiet way, just in that she didn't lose herself through all the sort of ugliness. And that's kind of where I see, whether it's the nation, whether it's the state, whether it's our communities, we're going to mess up. We're not going to have perfect leaders for sure. we're not going to be perfect ourselves, but through all the kind of ugliness and stuff that's coming at us, there's a lot of beauty. There's an awful lot of beauty to be had with each other. So that was my first play, but it was also my most personal play, and also the one that's just sort of kind of my outlook.
Okay.
I think Vera and I are very similar in our approach to things. I mean, I would obviously lean toward finding the good, title of one of my books. It's sort of radical optimism. And it comes out of my experience in writing obituaries. So again, it comes out of a really dark place. How do you respond try to find something good. I mean, what do you love? And why do you love it? And why do you love the life we're leading? I mean, that's where I come from. And it's not out of Pollyanna or rose-colored glasses. It's more because I know that really bad stuff happens, really dark things happen. And what saves me is, certainly acknowledging it, fighting it, doing what you can, but also not losing sight of, so much good. I think a lot of it really has to do, for me, with living in a small Alaskan community and knowing my neighbors well, being surrounded by so many good friends and family, and seeing every day like really good things happening in the midst of, sometimes the worst news in the world. And like recently I was, trying to cheer some of my neighbors up. There were people in Haines, which, is a very small town, and where I think sometimes our leadership, especially right now, kind of follows a little bit of what's happened nationally in our last election. It went very right. And some of the, more liberal, progressive people were voted off the assembly, and it swung the other way, make Haines great again. And there are some people in the community that were scared, particularly the LGBTQ plus community, which those people who are in power right now probably would tell you aren't in Haines, because we don't have a gay pride parade. We don't have a group. They willfully choose to not see, to make that part of our community invisible, I think. And so I thought, well, what can I do? Last night I went to the city council meeting, and I told them, the borough assembly it's called here. And I said, I wanted to tell them something good about what's happening in Haines. And I stood up kind of and I told them that, I stood up on Zoom, but I told them that I had gone to a meeting that was called by one of the people who is a leader in the LGBTQ plus community in Haines. It was at a local pizza place. She offered a safe space, and she's a woman now, but used to be a man. And she wanted people to come that were feeling afraid or to support that group. So I went last Friday night, and I was pulling in the parking lot and walking in the rain to the pizza place, and a cop car pulled up. Regular cop car. Out steps one of our largest police officers in full kit and caboodle. I mean, gun, radio, bulletproof vest, and marches up and into the building. And in these weird times, and even in Haines, I kind of stiffened. I was like, oh God, what is going to happen here? And that police officer went up to the organizer and hugged her, big bear hug, and said, and looked at the other people in the room who were like wide-eyed, and said, you are courageous. I'm here to protect you. Don't worry, I've got your back. And they exchanged cell phone numbers. They did all this. And I thought, that's who we are, and we can lose sight of it. And that's, I guess, the way that I chose to talk about people being afraid, that there were people watching out. And I don't mean to be, diminish anybody's feelings or not want people to be scared. I'm not one of those people that is really particularly threatened personally by what's happening. But I feel like an obligation to be there for other people, and then to tell the stories of people who are standing up that might not be the ones that come to mind first, just to sort of break down some of those stereotypes about what's left, what's right, who's good, who's bad.
You're on mute, Ronald.
So that have you seen some of that also, Vera, where you've seen people standing up, doing the right thing?
Oh yeah, I was raised in that, that world. Both sides of my family were very politically involved, especially in Native politics, in very different ways. And So uh, I was born definitely with a sense of, if you don't do it, who's going to? Like that's just your responsibility to your community and to your clan and to your family. And so I think my expectation almost is that people will stand up, and people do. And I think we could take that for granted sometimes and lean a little bit too hard on people that always do stand up, and we need to remind ourselves that it can't just be them. And that's sort of usually whenever I'm doing an action, or I'm testifying in front of the Senate, or writing a letter, to about a law or whatever. It's usually because I've had to remind myself that if I don't do it, who is going to? You can't just sort of lean on them. So I think what I'm hoping the most is that more people are activated, more people are engaged. That's a lot of the point. I shouldn't say the point. A lot of what I hope people will take from a lot of what I do is you can do something seemingly small and it can have a huge impact, or it can have a domino effect of a lot of different people doing that same small thing. And that continues to this day. I see artists as being really powerful in that fight, like really powerful. I think the outcry when you see, whether it's a tragedy, whether it's an election where it's contested points, people use art to express themselves, even if they don't consider themselves artists, or don't even think they're leaning on art. You'll see the quotes, you'll see the videos, you'll see it come out in TV shows eventually. You'll see them, if they don't know what to say, art will often speak for them. So they gravitate toward that. And I see a lot of my job now as giving them something to say, giving them, here, this is what I mean. I can't articulate it myself, or, hey, this is how I feel. This is really hard to pass along, but that's so much of the goal of when I write, whether it's literally a daily, like, social media post or a big opera that I'm doing or whatever. I see so many people, so many more people wanting to act, wanting to do something, and don't know what to do or what to say. So I feel like that's just a tool I can give them. So yeah, I guess, I mean, that was a pretty long answer to say, oh yeah, I see it constantly every day. But as far as my role in it, I'm really kind of honing in on what my role in that is. And that's part of it. It's just giving them a piece of art, a piece of emotion, something to go, here, this is what I feel, this is what I want to do. I know, I love it. I'm really proud of our artist community. When hard times come, like, I'm always really proud to be an artist.
Yeah, I think what you're saying too resonates. I mean, we're not political activists. We're not running for office. What we do is tell stories that people interpret right in their heart, like one to one. Someone reads a poem, or they read a essay, or they see a play, and it's very personal how they interpret it, and that you don't know who's in that room or who's in the library, who's picked it up and when. And I I struggled with this in my life. Like, how do I balance? Like, okay, I'm a writer, or am I an activist? Am I, and I ran for public office in Haines, and it wasn't my strong suit. I had too much empathy. I could look around the room and tell everybody's stories. I wasn't good at taking sides or voting. I wanted to see consensus all the time. And as to what Ron mentioned earlier, and I know Vera does this, and I attempt to, or I've learned through my writing career, is that the more personal I am, the more I write to very specific, my own needs, not preachy, not generic, not this is the way the world is and this is what we've got to do, not an op-ed, but more of a poem in terms of emotion that reaches people. And it can reach people who maybe don't think they agree with me, or don't think they like me, or think they don't like me just based on some other particular outside reason, and yet we can connect. And I will say that I actively try to do that. And living in a community like mine that has been deeply divided since I've been here for 40 years. And sometimes honest to God, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, why does it have to be so hard? Why does every day have to be like spiritual boot camp? Why can't I just hang out with my friends that are like me, that all agree with me? Why on earth am I going to deal with the borough assembly today? Or even going to church. I'm a faithful person. I go to church, but I don't always agree with everything that's going on there. But I show up to sit there to say, see, I'm with you, part of this, and we're hearing the same thing, but our responses are completely different. It's like a witness, but then I tell the stories of what happened. And I think that's the role of the artist in this. It's odd, but after this election, I actually felt empowered more than I have in a long time. It's like, okay, in my mind, the worst has happened. So how am I going to deal? And I've been writing every day. I've been blogging every day. And I've been getting these responses from people that I didn't even know read them, that are thanking me for what I'm telling them. And I'm trying to write the kind of thing that I'd like to read, that I'm searching for in the morning, not the headlines, not a little meditation, but something that reflects the honesty of my emotions and experience, and also my aspirations, like how to keep up in this dark time, how to be light. And I'm, as always, I keep coming to the conclusion that it's the small things. It's if you can't resolve pain in your family, how am I going to resolve it in the community? If I can't resolve it with my neighbors or the person I'm sitting next to in church, where am I going with this? And if I can write that story in a way that is immediate and in the moment, even though I've processed it some, there is in the art form a narrative distance, but it's pretty short right now. And so there's not all of it's going to hit the mark, but I think we have to try. And I think we have to acknowledge our shortcomings in it too. And when someone says, oh, easy for you to say, I know it is. I'm sorry, but I want to say something. What would you like me to say? Help me to better present this, So I think the role of writers, artists, no matter what we're doing, is super important right now. And I'll tell Vera a story that I heard during my time as the laureate from Lorelei Ivanoff, who's a Native woman from Unalakleet. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. She has a blog. And anyway, Lorelei was talking about how in her lifetime, the biggest thing that lifted her up was a Maxwell House TV commercial that was filmed during the Iditarod, that had a Inupiaq musher saying some of his own words as he was getting a cup of coffee in a cabin. They used the whole Iditarod thing. And then she said she heard her language for the first time on television, and they'd all been watching television and they were plugged in to the national media, but they never saw themselves. They never heard themselves. People didn't live in houses like theirs, didn't look like them. And here was that. And she was just like, I belong. And that's the work you do with Molly of Denali, and it seems like something small, but I have grandchildren who are Native. And, I love for them to watch that cartoon, to see themselves, not only as Alaskans, but Native Alaskans in all the episodes, it's a life changer, and their parents like it. And who knows what the politics of their parents are, how they think they feel about this particular land use issue or that subsistence or sovereignty issue. It's all out the window when they fall for Molly. And that's really the power of art.
So let me throw this to you, Vera, to follow what Heather was saying. She talked about it was really important to make what's invisible visible sometimes. You don't see it, and then you do. And the writer has done that, and she gave an example. You want to talk a little bit about, and also I want to expand, because Heather said, well, she's not an advocate. Well, yes, she is, but nonetheless, she's a different kind of advocate. One of the role of the writer, you have many different roles, right? There is advocate, there is provocateur, there's all of these different things that a writer demands in their own way, in their own style, for people to get to the real issues that matter. So how about share with us where your lens is with regard to potentially making that which is not visible visible. I mean, give an example and let's talk about that, because I think we all agree that that's really important, and it's one of the things that both of you do.
Well, I think unfortunately, nationally and maybe internationally, being Native is an invisible life. I think Alaskans can kind of take that for granted a bit because we're a bit more visible. And I think I will speak for Chilkat Country when I say we're very visible in Chilkat Country. So I think I certainly took that for granted before I was traveling a lot more in the lower 48. And some of it's like you can quote the percent, like 1% or less of the US is Native. And if you take Alaska Native out of that, it's even less for the lower 48. So there's just an invisibility there, even though this is our land, and the just heartache and grief of that is something I'm going to be trying to explain the rest of my life, that this is our land, and we're not seen on it. My mentor, Larissa Fast Horse, wrote this heartbreaking play, What Would Crazy Horse Do? And I'm going to mangle this quote from her, but it sticks with me years later after I saw this performed, where the Native woman in it, who's trying to fight for her people, and she's coming up against Klansmen and all these people, and she says, how do we keep fighting against an enemy that doesn't even know we exist? And there's just something so heartbreaking in that you're fighting your whole life, and there's a huge swath of the country that actually literally believes there are no more Indigenous Americans. Like literally, like the existence, not even just like they don't think of us much. It's like they literally don't believe we exist anymore. So a lot of my work is just in that invisibility, bringing that out and making people aware. Molly of Denali was wonderful in that. There's a whole generation of kids now that can go like, well, I know they do because Molly does. That was the emotional part for me in writing for it from the beginning. For specifically Alaska, I think it's while we're more visible here, it's broadly a pretty negative look when it comes to non-Native people. That's the sense we get. And a lot of it is not even, Alaskans aren't aware that they're even thinking of us so negatively, and that we only exist in regards to homelessness or alcoholism or suicide or prisons. Like that's our whole existence, and our success and our joy and our exceptional cultures and intelligence are just completely invisible. So within Alaska, that becomes my job, is to bring that out. That it's kind of funny because my first play was about sexual abuse, but to me that wasn't the point. And so many non-Native people responded to that story in a familiar way, because it wasn't unique to Alaska Native people what happens. It's treated like these sort of negative social ills are treated as uniquely Alaska Native, and they're not. And if you look at, I could get on a little soapbox here. Like if you look at the economy of Alaska, if you look at how much of the engine of it is driven by Native corporations, Native businesses, healthcare, like there's a huge engine there. When it comes to healthcare, I mean, we did some huge things during COVID, Native healthcare and Native healthcare leadership. I think we came off much better than a lot of lower 48 places because of that Alaska Native leadership. When it comes to culture, I think there's a huge reason why so many Southeast communities are known as being very artist driven. And I believe that's directly due to the Chilkat presence and the Chilkat just sort of like unapologetic. We're here. You're going to see our beautiful art and culture right in front of your face. So everything I do as a Native person is in itself activist. Like it's just me existing, just me working, just me succeeding. But building on that, I do have kind of an agenda when I do something nationally. It's going to be, okay, how do they see us? Well, I'm going to upend those expectations. Or just, unfortunately, one of the expectations is we don't exist. So just announcing we are here. In Alaska, what are those expectations of Alaska Native people? Well, I'm not going to write about that. I'm going to write about the Alaska Native people I know. I'm going to write about the Alaska Native culture and joy and intelligence and creativity that I know. So I feel like all of my work is in that invisibility of Alaska Native or Native American life and bringing that out, making that visible again.
Wow. So that raises a couple of issues. I'll throw it back to Heather and then to you, Vera. What you just said is you're wanting to present truth, which is one of the other things that authors and scientists, arts and sciences, that they try to do. Could you talk a little bit about, you could say Finding the Good was one of your titles. Another title could have been Finding the Truth, right? About various things. Because you want to, not the truth or a truth, but there's something really important that's striving for that, because that may not be always apparent.
No, and I think the truth changes. I mean, I think if I look in my lifetime in Haines, and even if I go back to my first book, If You Lived Here, I'd Know Your Name. Now, the history of Haines was told by the Presbyterian director of the museum. The story that everybody told really wasn't the truth, but that's what everybody believed because that's what we were told. So it changes. There's things in some of my books that aren't true that I thought were then. And I think part of a big job of the writer is to continually update those truths. Don't stay living in the same stories. The thing that almost paralyzed me in the beginning when I was writing was something that Vera just alluded to. It was like, oh, you're an Alaskan writer, so you speak for Alaskans. No, I can speak for a small slice of Alaska where I live in Haines and the people I know and the stuff I see. I'm not like Alaskan with a capital A. And I appreciate Vera's feeling that too, like not speaking of, and I think I heard this correctly, but trying to be everything for Native with a capital N, but telling the stories of the people that she knows and the lives that she's around, and that is it's so much easier and harder, but it's so much more connecting to tell your truth, what you know is truth. And what threw me off, I think in the beginning sometimes too, people would read the same story that I'd written and say, that's not true. That's not what happened. It's not what happened to them in the room. They didn't see the band playing the same way I did at a basketball game. They didn't see the mom crying because her son in the band was playing the trumpet that belonged to her father, and we were just at her father's funeral the day before. I see these things in a room. I see a kind of a truth that I realized a long time ago isn't what everybody else sees. It's not the newspaper version or the visitor's guide version. It's kind of what's happening emotionally, even physically. Who's moving away from somebody, who's coming back, what are the relationships, and why are they behaving that way? And so I watch that. I guess I see that in a way that's different. And when I am part of, I think, the Alaska writer tradition, where it was like, well, we can't have too many Alaska writers because there's only one, and down in the lower 48 they don't want this, and you have to be it's all about Alaska, and people would be surprised when I said, well, they have sidewalks in Haines and people live in apartments. And it's like, no, it's all like the wilderness. And we had writers in Haines who would talk about the wolves that they could hear howling out the cabin door, and you could drive to their cabin and electricity. Like, they were trying so hard to be Alaskan, that highlighting all that. And I was just like, well, this is the Alaska I live in, and it's not that one. Not to say that one doesn't exist. There are people that do live in cabins in McGrath or whatever, that have a whole different life than I do, or in the Arctic, where I've never really been. It's not my place. I can't write about what's going on up there in any kind of an honest way, unless I visit it, and then it's only in response. But I can do, even as Vera was talking about with, I can't, as a white woman, write the stories of Native people. But what I can do is go to get my COVID shot and talk about the Native clinic giving shots to all the white people that used germs to kill them 100 years ago or less, who had them in boarding schools and did these things. And this was their response when we were sick, to get us the vaccines. And I can write about that, and I can write about it in a meaningful way, because I'm sitting in the room with these people, and history is that close. And so I can say it from my perspective. Is that the truth? It's my truth. It's not the whole truth. But it is a kind of a truth. And I feel like those are the kind of things I can look for in the big wheel of time, I think, and in the way we are as Alaskans and relate to each other.
Vera, you want to weigh in on just that aspect of what you're doing and continue to do?
On the, sorry, what essence? I think there's a lot of good stuff there.
Aspect of looking for the truth.
Oh, yeah.
There's advocacy is one kind of job. Another thing is to find out the truth. And I have evidence of your work that's a concern of yours.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. I think my work has sort of evolved I mean, any writer could say this, like as my thinking has evolved on the truth. And there's sort of like the truth as opposed to lies version. And I think the younger me and the younger writer that I was sort of in this artists must always expose truth, speak truth, like this kind of ultimate black and white kind of thinking of it. And then one of my favorite TV series, West Wing. I'm that generation. Just like loved it. And speaking of laureates, there's an episode they did on the U.S. Poet Laureate. Beautiful, beautiful work. But the U.S. Poet Laureate in that is sort of challenged where Toby's like, it's your job to speak truth. And she's like, truth? We're lucky if we can get to truth. If we can open your eyes for a second to beauty or, art or whatever. I'm totally, ruining this beautiful Aaron Sorkin dialogue that he had there. But I always think of that now. When I watched it when I was much younger, I remember just going like, of course we do truth. That's what we do. That we are artists. And I am so much less black and white now, in that I don't know the truth as far as the truth of life, the truth of even justice, the truth, you know it when you see it. And I don't think as much my job anymore as I see it, to sort of expose the truth. When I literally was like, as a very young journalist, especially, it was sort of exposing the truth and getting the lies out there. I think I wish we had more words. This is when I always wish I was better at speaking Chilkat language, because we have much better words for these kinds of things, more descriptive, it's a very descriptive language. And I wish I sort of had more words to talk about what we're even trying to do, what our point is, what our purpose is. And I think the interesting part I'm learning as I get older is it's not necessarily my job to give you what you're going to get out of this. Like it's not really my job to make you go march, make you go do this, make you feel a certain way. Even I hope you can. I understand that, West Wing laureate now better when she's like, oh gosh, if we could do that, that's a happy accident. You're able to do it. If I can get you to feel at all, that's an accomplishment. Oh boy, if I can get you to cry, that's amazing. that's a sick thing that writers do that we're like, yes, the crying. But when it comes down to Our Voices Will Be Heard premiered in 2016. It wasn't that long ago. I would write it so differently now. Just having evolved and written a lot more scripts. And it's not to say that the truth that I was sort of trying to point toward in that is wrong or different, but just my understanding of what my job is and what an artist's job is so different. So that's kind of a big non-answer of truth or not, but it's where I'm at right now in my little writer journey.
I think it's perfect. And I think wait till you're my age, then you really even know less and everything's gray. There's stuff that I was so sure of when I was your age that I'm not anymore. And I actually think that's a big part of the job of an artist and a writer in particular, is to evolve, to show those changes and to be able to change your mind and to come to things through a emotional portal, not necessarily a logical one. Again, the op-ed versus the poem, to move hearts. And you're not going to move any hearts if yours doesn't move in one direction or the other. I think tears, laughter, I think humor is huge when it comes to and to telling the truth, because if you don't have it, you can't really find it. There's a lot of funny stuff that happens, and when you take yourself too seriously and you start writing towards themes, truth, beauty, social justice, forget it. It just falls flatter and flatter and flatter. If you want to, I don't know, do anything like save the stray dogs in your town, well, adopt a dog and write a story about the dog, and make sure you include the bad parts, that he ripped up the slippers and peed on the carpet, and don't just write about the perfect dog that you got. And that will go a lot farther than a whole big long thing about how many dogs are put to sleep and what abandoned on the streets and blah 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 blah. Write about something that moves a heart, and that, as and the other thing, I think when you talked about truth and telling it, like when you're younger, people sometimes say to me, well, you don't always tell the bad stuff. I know some things in Haines that you haven't written about, and I said, well, there's just not. I don't write about everything. I wait. There's reasons. There's relationship reasons. There's family reasons. There's my own understanding of a situation. There's whose story is it to tell? Has it been resolved? Even when I write about what seems to be very personal things in our family, I'm writing it from a distance, but I'm making it appear that it's right then. I'm going back into the emotion at the time, but it's been resolved by the time I write it and resolve it in the essay. It's not happening in real time. I might have written it in real time, but I wait for a while before I publish it or put it out to public use. And that's just me. I don't think there's a right or a wrong in that, but there's ways and reasons to tell the truth. The older I get, the more I feel like do no harm, do good, like not only find the good, but do it with your work, help somebody. It doesn't mean that might not, you don't call truth to power or whatever, but lift up people. Don't be judgy. That's the stuff that I think about. Just tell the story without commentary, how you feel. Let them read it and feel it, or hear it and feel it. So it's otherwise, I think sometimes it just becomes a paralyzing burden if you're the one that's supposed to be the arbiter of all truth for a town or a clan or a family or whatever it is, an organization that you're part of, or a group of people, the arts. I can't do it. I'm not that big a person, I guess.
So another issue that relates to this, I can give you an example from Alaska Quarterly, and then maybe Vera can weigh in, and maybe you, Heather, afterwards. We got a letter from an institution that had subscribed to Alaska Quarterly Review. And then we got the letter, and what it said is Alaska Quarterly Review was being removed and banned. Okay, and why was that? Well, the essay we published, which turned out to be not only in the Best American Short Stories after we published it, but also got the writer an agent, and then she published books and everything else. That essay caused Alaska Quarterly to be banned. Now, some of our viewers who will see this later, they've heard about this idea of books being banned, writings being banned, of art pieces being covered over with black plastic so nobody can see it, or whatever it is. This is another kind of truth that I'd like to get at. I mean, there are things that are out there that people don't want you to see. There are things that have happened they don't want to get out there. And people might be surprised. Now, this thing that was taken off the shelves was not in Alaska for us. This was in the lower 48. This wasn't here. But our viewers should note from outside, even though we're far away, we're not far away. We have, Nobel laureate books being taken off shelves and having debates about it. And I just have maybe one more specific question related to that. Have you experienced any of that yourself? Do you know of anything about it that would relate to your work? And the second thing is, if not, the two of you obviously have a voice that, although you don't represent everybody, you do represent all of us, let's just say, in a way, about maybe that's not a good thing for things to be banned or not. You could weigh in as you choose. So Vera, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this or know about it yourself, and then maybe just weigh into it about maybe what you've seen and what you've heard. And then Heather, I don't know if little Haines has had any of these issues, but I do know that closer to Anchorage, there have been these issues. I know that for sure. So go ahead, Vera, and let's hear what your experience has been.
Yeah, I have two pretty good examples of that I don't know why they surprise. It always surprises me. I love books so much that anytime it's incomprehensible to me. But the first one was a more of a national one. So Molly of Denali is program I write for on PBS, and some of the episodes were turned into books, like early readers. One of those, Berry Itchy Day, which was based off an episode by Princess Johnson. Super cute. It's about Molly goes berry picking. Mosquitoes inevitably, every Alaskan can they can relate. Mosquitoes inevitably come and bug them, and they find like a natural remedy, because they forgot their bug spray, so they find a natural remedy to fix that. And that was pulled from the shelves in the lower 48 in multiple huge school districts. It made the news. It was on this huge list of books that were pulled, that weren't banned yet, but we're going to pull them until we review them. And it's now been years and they still haven't been reviewed. So it's one way to ban books, right? Well, we're not banning, we're just holding them off the shelves. There's absolutely nothing bad. Certainly it is a perfect children's book. It is about berry picking and friends and mosquitoes and just fun. And if you look at the list, that specific list, you'd find the sort of the usual suspects, right, that always get banned, which unfortunately are a lot of LGBTQ titles that are promoting the lifestyle by just talking about it, I guess, or about teaching sex education. Like those are kind of the usual suspects. And then you have this whole swath where you absolutely know these are books with brown people on the cover. And that's it. There's no reason. They could not have looked at that book or a lot of these books and done anything except for, well, there's brown people, therefore it's DEI or it's equity or it's whatever sort of bad word we have for this. And it's something that's still off the shelves. It's something that's still all of these books. I spoke out because I know very well this book, and I give it out, and I have given so many people this book because it's just so fun to me. But there were so many books on there that shouldn't even be controversial. I don't think LGBTQ stuff should be controversial. I don't think sex education should be controversial. But can't we all agree that if that story had just been about a white little girl who'd gone berry picking, that would never have been pulled from the shelves. It just wouldn't. So that's when we talk about sort of like truth and lies, that is still a point where I'll get real fired up on. And the other one, I think we look at those and we go like, oh, those things happening way down there, or those things happening elsewhere. There's been some local stuff. And this is something that's existed my whole life. Where there was funding pulled from an organization because of my native play. And that's how I said there's too much native stories, native plays going on. And so they pulled the funding. And that I was very proud actually of how the non-native people involved in that organization responded to it. But it also wasn't that unusual of a response. I think native people get a lot of this behavior, and it's not usually as overt as that, but you'll pull it or you ignore it, or you're going to pass on it because of the simple fact that it is a native story. That's honestly been my experience often with sort of the broader Alaska writing community. It can get pretty icky locally too. And we have to talk about those things. Like, I think it's easier to talk about these things that are happening with stuff we can't really do about, and those ridiculous people elsewhere that are doing these things. But it happens here too. It happens 2 blocks away from me, and it's a little more insidious when it's your neighbors and it's not being spoken about in quite that overt banning way, but more in a, well, but does it really make money? Well, but does it really get as many people engaged? Well, is it really the audience for it? Like, there's a lot of code words that are sort of used in that kind of a thing. So those are 2 pretty explicit examples. And I think when we talk about invisibility, like there's a lot of invisible to non-native people or non-people of color that don't surprise native or people of color at all, because it's part of life. It's part of what we have to do when we work.
I guess I'm supposed to jump in here. I'm not surprised, but I'm sad and sorry. And I live in Haines, which is really named Deschutes, and we've tried for years, native, non-native, local community, to acknowledge that, and it's very difficult. And the meaning Haines is even different than Juneau, because at least Joe Juneau was there. There was no Mrs. Haines never even visited here. She wrote a check for the mission that converted Native children to Christianity and took them out of their homes. I mean, that's her legacy. And it's been a interesting journey watching, particularly the huge insurgence, resurgence, renaissance, I would even call it, seems like to me, of what's happening with Native arts and culture in Juneau. In the downtown, the Sea Alaska Plaza, it's included everywhere. The language, the names of the schools, we call them that. I mean, Haines School now has a Tlingit name. I can't tell you what it is because nobody uses it. So we don't really. It's somewhere, but it's never at a school board meeting or anything. So it made some people feel good that they say it exists, but if you don't use it and don't use the language, what's the difference? We had a situation here where our last mayor said, "Oh, through the Chilkat Indian Association, we're gonna put some Tlingit street names, because the original names, what things are called." Well, they did it only in a native housing subdivision, which seemed to me to be even worse than what that was. They know the name. We're supposed to know the name. And when you ask about it, the answers are all very, oh, it costs too much. Oh, it's too difficult. No, it would be too confusing. We'd have to change the names of things on paper, anyway. So that it's racism, and it's loud and clear, but it's here. And it's something that, you just have to, you bump up against it every single day. So there's that. But the question about banning books, again, mine haven't been, and I doubt they ever would be, because look at me. However, I am on, I was a longtime member of the Haynesboro Public Library and the Friends of the Library, and now I'm the chairman of the Teneke Library Board, and I'm super aware of the efforts. And in Haines, we've had them too. None overt. Ours are pretty creepy. People will actually just steal the book, take it out of the library, and not return it. Or there were people that were tearing pages out of certain books, and we couldn't catch them. We went around and around how to do this, and we just basically, it's part of the cost of doing business, and we put it back in. It's also been interesting with some of the powers that be, the local government, when they don't really understand the library freedom clause, that everybody has to talk about the freedom of the books in the library, in particular that children can have a library card and take out whatever book they want, and their parents don't have to know about it. It's where a lot of people have learned things, and this drives some people crazy, because they don't want their kids looking at certain books. And we have to explain over and over again that that's not our policy. Anybody can check out a book. So, I think the pressure is always there, but I think it's been amped up by rhetoric that is out there. I will say the other thing, though, as a writer who does just print and not what most people are watching, most people are absorbing as information. The DVD section of both the Haines Library and the Teneke Library is the most circulated. Books aren't. And so to think that the target is books, when if it gets more people to read those banned books, at least they're still seeing books as powerful things that can influence people, because there's really not a lot of kids reading. And I hate the idea that now they're going to be reading even less, because, and so I guess on the one hand, it's honestly, it kind of makes me feel a little better that people are still threatened by books, when the information that's in them is available in more than one place. Any banned book now, you can get the text of it on your phone from anywhere in the world. Like, you can't really ban them anymore. That's an old-fashioned thing. The concern is that people really, that they want to. And that is, I don't know what to do about that, but it's sort of, you just have to keep on keeping on and keep putting new books on the shelves, and with challenging ideas and things that this year might seem radical, and 20 years from now, they're going to say, why did anybody think this was strange? And I think the other thing is, every time you write a book or you put it on the shelf of the library, you don't know who's going to pick it up and what it's going to mean to them at that moment. And I will say, on the back end of the banned book, those of us who are in a position to kind of be gatekeepers, you're going to blurb a book, or you're going to help promote, or you're going to talk about it. I am always encouraging more voices. And I've read some books that were so difficult for me to read, that were so hard or violent, or the images or the language in them were things that to me was really hard to process. And then my first reaction was like, oh, I can't recommend this book to anybody. And then my second reaction and my better self said, well, wait a minute, this book could save somebody's life. Somebody could read this and know that this is what that person went through, and it might be what they're going through, and it's going to save them. And the stuff that's in this book is there for somebody. And it might not be for me, but I got to make sure that book, I say that exactly in the blurb. This book could save somebody's life. And it's hard to read, but someone's going to need it. And the danger right now in our world, as I see it, is not having, more Native voices or more immigrant voices or more trans voices, whatever is coming out there, but not having enough. I mean, the consolidation of the media and who's publishing what and who's picking what goes where is pretty scary, and it's all homogenized. And we just have to make sure that more people are able to tell their stories in whatever medium they can, and then it gets out there. And that's the only way we're going to save the world, is through understanding how each of us lives. And stories, books, TV, film, plays, radio, poetry, that's how we can really literally and figuratively walk in someone else's shoes. And that builds empathy, and that's going to save us. And to stop it before you even know is just ridiculous. I think it's that's all I have to say about it. And I'm agree with Vera that those of us who have a voice in this just have to make sure that we keep bringing it on and don't go, wait a minute, what's going on with this and that? It's not helpful.
Yeah. Well, I'll make one comment and I'll ask you a final question. One, I think it's also really important, for example, like Alaska Quarterly, that we focus on non-commercial work, because that's another big divider between, the excuse that you were given, Vera, like, well, is it going to make money? That's always the excuse, right? Let the market decide, right? And sometimes things that need to be told are not necessarily popular at the moment. They're ahead of their time, and they need to be out there. So let me ask both of you, because this has been amazing and such an honor to have both of you on. What are you working on now? In other words, just give us a little peek into what you're working on, and any other thing that you want to add. Why don't we start with you, Vera? Because Heather just went last, just before we alternated a little bit there.
Well, I'll even, as far as want to add, I'll actually even just hop off your last one about being commercial. It's almost my my new duty in life. Sometimes just out of spite, honestly, because I hear that so much in the theater or the book or TV, especially, worlds about, these are Indigenous stories are small stories. They're not commercial stories. They're the more the indie stuff. And yet, Devilfish, my last play, huge commercial success. And some of it came about because I was going, I don't even care anymore. I'm writing this for Tlingit people. I want Tlingit people to be proud of it. I'm not going to think about any of it. And wouldn't you know, people responded to it. Alaska Daily on ABC, which was sort of the biggest TV show I've written for. The more authentic people went with it, the more people responded to it commercially. When it comes to stories, like the more authentic, as in the more you're ensuring that the people of that community are the ones writing from that community, are the ones you're actually hearing from. Oftentimes you actually get commercial success along with it. I don't think art has to be commercial for sure. I do an awful lot of art myself that will never see the light of day because I just love doing it. But it's kind of become my new soapbox as far as just like, guess what? When you get out of our way, we know how to tell amazing stories that engage people and make them want to buy it. So let it, just literally get out of the way. That's kind of been the problem, is the gatekeeping. So that's my little extra I wanted to add just after we were talking a little about the commerciality of it. But for what I'm working on, I almost feel like, what am I not working on? I definitely, I'm very aware that I have a really diverse palette of writing that I work with. Because I get that comment no matter what sort of medium I go into. I write plays. I'm writing an opera right now. Children's animated television. I have a pretty big project. Fingers crossed, everybody. That's a live action TV program that I'm hoping will go some places. I am working on a book right now. I got permission to say I do have a book contract with Scholastic, and that is a middle grade book. So I'm working on that right now. And I honestly, like with the laureate, the Alaska State Writer Laureate has project funds and just sort of a mission of do what you can to promote literary arts in Alaska. And I'm thinking an awful lot about that right now too, of the easiest something, because I actually, what a lot of people actually don't know, I used to be a blogger. I was an anonymous blogger, which is why a lot of people don't know about it. That got pretty big for a while politically. It was much more of a political blog. And I've always loved that field. I've done worked in communications at places. So my immediate thing I'm going to work on it for the laureate is like, what online thing can I do pretty immediately that doesn't take a lot of funds, and it does take some time, but so I'm kind of in the middle of figuring out what that is, and the laureate projects. Maybe that'll be workshops, maybe that'll be anthologies, maybe, like I love thinking about that. And some of the reason that I work in so many different mediums is because I love all of it. I just love storytelling. And I haven't yet found a medium I don't like. I'm maybe officially not a journalist anymore, but I've said that for years, and then I keep getting sucked back into it. So yeah, I'm working on a lot of projects. The sad part about an awful lot of them, especially in theater and especially in TV, is you can't talk about them. You could say almost nothing, and sometimes you can't say anything about it. I actually, when I did a Disney show, I didn't realize I hadn't told my husband until I was finished with an episode, because they really lock you down with those NDAs. But I hope Alaska and the rest will be hearing more about those kind of projects that are I'm not talking about it vaguely on purpose to be mysterious. Like, I will tell everyone individually at this point just to be able to talk about it. But yeah, the TV one is probably the biggest, and then the book for Scholastic.
My turn. I was told to just, a friend of mine said, Heather, when people ask you what you're writing on, just tell them that you're writing a sweeping historical novel of 7 generations of an Alaska family, and it's going to take you 20 years to finish it. So I actually, it's interesting. I'm always working on a couple of things, and I've been writing for a couple of years a Teneke journal about what I'm doing with this cabin that I built there, and I have basically a draft that I have to decide what I want to do with. And I've been looking at that in different ways, and maybe even sort of mixed genre, some fiction, some nonfiction mixed up in it, and telling a story that weaves through to try to help myself explain what I'm doing there, the possible storylines that relate to my family but didn't connect. And so there's that. But then also, really, what's been fun just this last week, I'm all excited because I've just started blogging again like a crazy person. I've been so inspired by the election and by, there's a need now, people need me to talk to them, and it makes me feel like I can do something when I want to do something. And so just in the last week, I've been blogging a lot more, and I've had a discussion about where to go with that. And for me, it's kind of going right back full circle, because I began my writing career with radio, short pieces, 200, counting the words, Vera, it's 250 to 300 words for those NPR pieces. One little story, one little slice. Then I went to columns, and they seemed huge because they were 700 words. Oh my gosh, then some of them, the bigger now we want 1,200, 1,500 words. And then to do a book was pulling it out of me to go more. And that was against everything that I'd been doing, counting all these words. And now I'm circling back around to the blog, which is as intimate as radio, as immediate, not necessarily polished, not the whole thing, not a piece you'd write for AQR or for posterity or anything, but it's a immediate form of communication that I find very satisfying to write. And I really like the pressure of opening up my laptop, going live, typing it in, popping in a picture and hitting the button, and there you've published. And all these people are reading it. And it's landing in their inboxes or popping up on their social media page or whatever. And it's like, where does it go? I don't know. But I'll tell a story about that. Years ago, and it's a note that I keep on my desk. I was blogging, and I kind of apologized to people who were expecting one every day. And I wrote a little blog about being in the grocery store in Haines in January, and it looked like Vladivostok, and there was no bananas and fresh fruit. And then we started talking with Susan about the fact that the tomatoes were bad. And I said, but who really cares what we think about tomatoes? I should be writing about the big things in life. But we talked a little about how she was depressed, but she works at Lende Canal Mental Health, and maybe, and more people were coming in. It was just to me, it was nothing and an apology and a throwaway. And literally, like the next day, I got a note from someone that I do not know who said, seeing Susan in the grocery store and doing something as normal as realizing there's no good tomatoes, and talking a little bit about how you feel, you have no idea how much that means to me right now to read that. And it was like a lifeline. And then I just realized, what I send out is important, and it matters. So I'm going back right now to that. And I'm excited about it. And I find that when I have an impulse to write, do it. And I also think the other thing I do when I'm writing, my dogs are here, is that I try very hard to shine light on other writers. Pick up a poem or something that helps. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. There's somebody at the door, I think. But the one thing too I wanted to share to Vera about, and your question about commercial rum, when I wrote If You Lived Here, I'd Know Your Name, I had this idea that I was going to write about, obituaries in Haines and sort of a way into the community through writing them, which is what the book's about. And I didn't think I had any real hope of getting it published by a real publisher, a big one. So I talked to a little one, an Alaskan publisher, and I had this idea, and I called them up, and the woman who was the gatekeeper then said, "You want to write about dead people?" And I said, no, it's really about lives, but it's from Haines. And she said, if every single person in Haines bought it, it would lose money. And that book has gone on to be a national bestseller. And it's the same thing. It was writing about the stuff that I really wanted to write about. And I know that doesn't happen for everybody, but I think if you write the stories that you want to write, and when you're not really thinking about where it's going to be. This one was just for Haines. I wanted, my audience was local, and my friends and neighbors, and it it turned out to be a very popular commercial book. So for what it's worth. And the idea, as a writer too, the idea of commercial, you want people to read the stories. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? You want to share it. And so that's a good thing if more and more people see or hear or read what we're doing.
Okay, well, this has been a pleasure speaking with both of you. On behalf of Alaska Quarterly Review, it was an honor, Heather, an honor, Vera, and hope to see you both soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Ron. Bye.